I am asked, do you know I get this question all the time? What are the common fears of Christians about sharing their faith? And the truth is, fear is a huge issue. And what I find particularly interesting, because my husband and I are doing evangelism ministry all over the world, we hear the same fears all the time. The one that comes up first is, but what if I offend? And what my response to that would be, if you're afraid of offending them, why not ask? What is interesting to me is I will often ask an audience, well, how many of you are afraid of offending? How many of you are really afraid? Every hand goes up. How many of you have told that person, you know, I'm really excited about my faith, but I don't like Bible bashers. So if I'm coming on too strong, would you just let me know? No hand goes up. Now, why is that? Because I don't think we realize that we need to be ourselves. We need to be authentic. And when we're saying, I really don't want to, come across aggressively or be a Bible banger, what do they think? They think, oh, you're normal. I was worried. So that would be the first fear I hear. A second one that comes up globally is, what if they reject me? Which, of course, is a real possibility. There's three issues about rejection. I think the first issue about fear of rejection is it may be that the non-believer is really rejecting God. That's really what they don't want. They don't want God in their lives, and we get the bullets. It isn't that we've been insensitive or whatever. It's just that they almost have to reject us, but really they're rejecting God. Now that takes some spiritual discernment to know that, but it's something we endure for the sake of Christ. And because we travel worldwide, when I have seen the suffering of my brothers and sisters, particularly in the global South, and in the West, in the global North, we tend to be upset if they raise an eyebrow. And I think, oh, come on, let's get a little stronger for the gospel. Another issue with rejection, though, is they reject us because we've been too aggressive. Now, that's something you can change. That is something where you need to maybe ask them or others that know you, am I coming on too strong? Am I being too aggressive? Then learn some sensitivity. Listen, ask questions. Don't be in such a rush that you get your point out, that you're overwhelming them. Now, the funny thing is about people that offend, they don't care. It's like, it's almost a feather in their cap, yes, for the sake of the gospel, I mowed them down for Jesus. Yeah, and they don't care if they were offensive. The third issue that strikes me, though, and that is in terms of rejection, is that usually if you're sensitive enough to worry about being rejected, it means that it's probably not your problem. You're worried about being offensive, and then they reject you. But if you're worried about it, it means you're already sensitive. So I see all these sensitive Christians walking around fearing being insensitive, and it's not their problem. Their problem is they probably lack boldness. But I think the ultimate answer to this is we live before an audience of one. We are to please God. And if we're looking for human approval, you will never make it as a witness. We look for divine approval. Doesn't give you, carte blanche to be offensive, but it does mean that we're living for the approval of the living God. Another fear that I hear a lot is, oh, what if they ask me a question and I can't answer it? I say, that happens to me all the time. And what do you say? You say, that is a fantastic question. I haven't a clue what the answer is, but I can't wait to find out. I am so glad God brought you into my life to help me grow too. People they won't be turned off because we don't know something. What turns them off is if they think we're judgmental and critical and self-righteous. So one, you affirm the question, that's the first thing. Two, often I'll say, ask them for more feedback. Can you elaborate on that question? Help me understand. Now that's for people particularly where you may not know the answer, you're not quick on your feet, and that's most of us, and we just need a little bit more time, and we're praying, Lord, show me what is the answer to this. But if you don't know, it's not a problem. You say so. And but you get back to them saying, I've been investigating this and I'd love to share what I understand. Closely related to this issue of what if they ask me a question I can't answer, is that we need to pay attention if the question they're asking seems to be accompanied by some pretty significant emotion. And in other words, are they asking this out of pain? So where is God in suffering? There are different ways you can ask that, but when it comes aggressive, what I'll often say is, that's an extremely important question. But can I ask you a question? You seem to have a fair amount of energy around that question. Can I ask you if there is a reason why this is so important? Somebody said this to me recently. Yes, my mother died at 10. Where was God? Now we know this isn't an academic question. This comes from a wound, and it shapes the way we speak and our sensitivity to somebody who has suffered. So those would probably be the top three that I hear all the time. I think a very important issue is understanding the challenges that face us in the 21st century. The cultural landscape has changed, especially in the West, and it will be happening in the global South. It's just a matter of time. But speaking for the West, now that means Australia, that means Europe, that means North America, it's the lethal distortions of advanced modernity. What has advanced modernity done? It is actually, it's astonishing. There's been the collapse of a belief in absolute truth. Consequently, what now is, what guides us is not any kind of authority, it's personal preference. Preference dominates everything. That's a big shift. Another is the way that people now pick whatever they want from every different religion or philosophy, cafeteria style. You know, oh, a little bit of karma, I'll have that. Oh, a little bit of this and that. And so and that's very different. It is, and also another thing, and there's more than this, the sexual revolution. The sexual revolution is a huge issue for Christians in terms of how do we address and talk about the gospel. Now, my point is, it's not just secular culture that has been impacted by advanced modernity, it has impacted us as well. We Christians have been more influenced by this than they realize. We see this so much in our evangelism training. For example, one of the things you realize, because you need to have confidence in the gospel, you need to have confidence in the supernatural power of God, and that's often what's missing, is that there isn't confidence that there is a supernatural, powerful dimension of God that can use us in any situation. Even though people won't often admit it, there is also a lack of confidence in the power of the gospel to transform lives. So part of the task of an evangelism trainer, like I am and my husband is how do you build confidence in Christians, build their faith? Now, faith is a gift, and you pray for a greater filling of faith, but it's why part of our training is not just the practical, and it certainly isn't just formulaic, but rather it's our theology that impacts our methodology. And so when you're looking at the truth of what we believe, it's actually profoundly motivational. Another place where we see how culture has impact, secular culture has impact Christians, is how often I hear people say, oh, I would love to witness, Becky, I really would, but I can't. I go, why? And they say, always, we hear this everywhere, I'm so inadequate. And my response is, well, of course you're inadequate. We're all all inadequate. That's the whole point. The biblical model is not self-sufficiency, it's God dependence. People always think that they need to be better, smarter, more able, but the truth is we need to be more God dependent. And again, with this a lack of confidence in the supernatural dimension of God, that often shows in feeling that, no, I'm inadequate. And of course, our answer is, you depend upon the power of the Spirit. We need to learn how to depend upon the Word of God, the Spirit of God. Another thing we hear all the time is, it's just not my gift. Evangelism is not my gift, thank goodness. It's really what you hear sense underneath. And when you look, before Jesus went to heaven, right before his ascension, he did not say, "Go ye therefore, all ye extroverts, and all of you with those dynamic relational skills, go and make disciples, and the rest of you, listen, just hang out. I'll be back before you know it." That is not what the Lord said. He said, "Go ye therefore, all of you." He never tied it to personality type. It doesn't matter if you're an extrovert or an introvert. He needs all of us to be able to witness. It does not matter if you are gifted as an evangelist. Everyone is called to be a witness. So what people need, I think, is, well, I think Christians need many things, but one of the things we see more than ever, they need equipping and training in evangelism, and it's what they need to ask their pastors for. Help us. It's why we do what we do, because with all the changes in culture, we need equipping now more than ever. Question I'm often asked is, what are the key things that believers need to be effective witnesses for such a time as this, in this challenging 21st century? I want to make one point though. Yes, times are challenging, especially in the West. There is a lot more hostility and unbelief and all the problems I've already mentioned, but I want to say something else, and that is, advanced modernity can never take away what God has placed in every human heart, the longing for meaning, for purpose, for identity. That doesn't go away, even though we have a very secular culture. In fact, if anything, I think our secular culture exacerbates the need we have. I saw this a lot living in Europe, that people, especially in the younger ones, it was almost like they were experiencing the back end of secularism. This isn't working, and we need help. And they were far more open to spiritual things than I ever dreamed. The problem is, if Christians if they're not talking, if they're not gossiping the gospel, I've seen this over and over again. There is spiritual hunger, and if they're not hearing it from Christians, where do they turn to? The occult. And it's shocking how often we've seen in bookstores just filled with books on the occult. And I think, you know, Christians have got to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, what do we need to be effective? First, we need faith. I've already mentioned that in my previous question. They need to realize God goes before us. It isn't up to us. We do the best we can, but it's God that's going to speak through us. It's His Holy Spirit that will make our words take root and have meaning. I spent so much time going, oh, I forgot to say this. Oh, I should have said that. Oh, I blew it. And then I finally realized, Becky, you're acting as if the whole success of evangelism is up to you, and you don't have the power to convert anybody. That's God's. You do the best you can. You keep growing and learning, but you know that God is going to come, the Holy Spirit is going to speak, and He will use you as you are. Now that's another point about faith. God really does delight to use us just the way we are, in our weakness. God is glorified in our weakness. That's a really important aspect of our teaching, is when you know God uses you in your weakness, as you learn how to depend upon God, oh my goodness, it just sets you free. So faith is certainly one thing. Also, we need a strategy. I believe for the church, the most effective strategy is equipping Christians in personal evangelism training, small group evangelism, and our passion is seeker Bible study, and then proclamation, the larger group, doing a creative outreach, a mission. Now go back to personal. I've said this already. I think it's more important today for churches to equip annually their members with a personal incarnational way of sharing the gospel. A way that, I mean, I can just tell you what we do, but what we do is I've said already, both the what do we believe and how do those beliefs then, because it's rooted in truth. How does the incarnation, how does the cross, how does the resurrection, how does that change the way I relate to people? You've got to tie the two together. The tendency tends to be either all preaching or all truth or all practical. You've got to bring them together. It's a holistic approach. We need to be biblically faithful, spiritually empowered, relationally effective, and spirit dependent. So that has to be part of the ongoing training. You need the really practical. You need to do things like, how do I overcome my fears? How do I even raise the topic of faith? How do I go from a natural conversation to a spiritual conversation? All of this is what we do in Empowered. That's our evangelism curriculum tool that we have done, all over the world. So that's the personal evangelism. Small group evangelism. Now we have Alpha, you have Christianity Explored that are wonderful. We do something where we are teaching Christians, after they're engaged in a conversation and a real relationship with an unbeliever, to say, you know what, you have got great questions, but I sort of have the impression that you've never actually read the Bible as an adult. What would you think if we get together and just take a look at one of the biographies of Jesus? Let's just do one story and see what you think. How can you possibly make an intelligent decision if you never even examine it? I cannot tell you the power of getting unbelievers, whether it's one or a group, you get them reading the Gospels. They always want to come back. It's never just the first time. But what happens? Jesus comes alive. Jesus is so beautiful. He is so powerful. He is so different than what they think. He's so radical. And the Bible is so comprehensible. I never hear somebody in a gospel, it's a Bible study on a gospel. And I never heard I've never yet, in all the years I've done this, hear an unbeliever say, well, that's one way of interpreting it. Honestly, it's never happened. It's so, you're reading the story, you're getting into the passage, it's lively, it's fun, and people get the point. So I can't count how many people that we have seen come to Christ all over the world with that understanding what evangelism is, what it means to be engaged with people, so the Christian becomes confident and competent. Then you do bring them into a seeker Bible study. Really, the seeker Bible study is probably first. Then you could do another thing like Alpha or Christianity Explored. Then bring them to a mission, a proclamation, evangelistic outreach. Now, what makes the outreach so much more effective? It needs to be done creatively. But if the Christian has the training, the non-Christian has been the recipient of a friendship, the unbeliever has also been looking at the Gospels, you bring them then to that event, and it'll just be much more fruitful. We've got to get away from this idea that evangelism is for the professional. What can I do to bring my friend to hear the professional? Evangelism is a way of life. And it doesn't matter your personality, and it doesn't matter if you're a gifted evangelist. God will use you just the way you are.